What's going on out there, all you brain-eating hotties from another planet? I am Zazubaar, and welcome to Day 5 of Gamera Palooza. So today we're going to be taking a look at a very, very interesting Gamera movie. Not interesting in terms of a deep story, or even a good story, or deep characterization, or any kind of interesting production thing. No, this one's interesting because it should be completely awful, yet I don't think it's completely awful. I actually really enjoy it. But let me establish some groundwork first, before we even announce the movie I'm going to be talking about. Though, if you clicked on the title and you know your Gamera history, you already know what it is. But indulge me for a minute, will you? So, with the last review of Gamera vs. Virus, I raved and ranted for about 45 minutes about how much of a piece of shit it was, calling it an unimaginative, messy, crappy kids movie that's just there to put on the screen and get your kids to shut up. It doesn't do anything creative, imaginative, or anything. And as a kids movie, it failed in that way because it wasn't that entertaining and wasn't that imaginative. The follow-up film, the 5th film in the Gamera series, Gamera vs. Guiron, follows almost the exact same story notes as Gamera vs. Virus and hits a lot of the same notes at almost the exact same times in terms of plot progression and character interaction, and just certain things happen in the movie that happened in Gamera vs. Virus. And overall, tonally, it's very similar. It's just about as campy. Gamera is characterized almost exactly the same way as he was in that movie, and overall, it's very clearly a continuation of that very campy, very child-friendly Gamera movie. And it's not exceptionally well made, and it's not exceptionally unique. So, why do I like it? Well, the answer is actually very simple. Because it's just way more imaginative than Gamera vs. Virus was. Gamera vs. Virus contained 20 minutes worth of stock footage, a hackneyed alien invasion story, annoying, unlikable characters, and overall was just a boring movie. Gamera vs. Guiron, while not necessarily a good movie, is at least entertaining. It at least makes an effort to be creative, and I think that's the best thing I can possibly say about it, and why I think I do enjoy it. Now, to be fair, this is probably going to be one of my more biased reviews of the later Showa Gamera films, which I warned you all in my promo I may get a little bit harsher on, as you started to see with Virus. But Gamera vs. Guiron is one of those few later Showa, I guess is the more the middle-of-the-road Showa Gamera movie, it's one of the few that I have actually a lot of nostalgia for, and I remember seeing it very young as a child and being completely engrossed with it. It wasn't the first Gamera movie I had ever seen, but it was certainly the most unique of the Gamera films that I had seen. I had seen the original one, I had seen Guardian of the Universe, and I think at that point I had seen Gamera vs. Gyaos, and I sat down and watched Gamera vs. Guiron, or as I watched it, Attack of the Monsters. And I absolutely loved it. I remember seeing it at my uncle's house when I went away there on vacation with my family, and we watched Gamera vs. Guiron, and I thought it was an absolute blast. And I think that ultimately, where Gamera vs. Guiron really excels is being a children's fantasy, and really capturing the mind of the child, and taking them on a fun journey. It's got a very Doctor Who-ish vibe, which is both a good thing and a bad thing in some instances, but we'll get to the bad in a second. I still want to focus on the good for a second. So, in that way, I really think that this movie excels at being better than its predecessor and doing something well that doesn't seem initially worthwhile in terms of being an installment in the Gamera franchise. Because as we talked about with Gamera vs. Gyaos, I think you can do both. I think you can make a campy, fun Gamera movie that kids can enjoy, while also making a Gamera movie that holds up as a decent monster movie. I mean, I would prefer the tone of Gamera vs. Barugan, but if we absolutely can't have that adult of a story, I think Gamera vs. Gyaos is still the template that should have been followed. However, they decided to go with Virus, and thankfully, however, Gamera vs. Guiron, while following the template set out by Virus, is a far better film than Virus was in terms of using that formula of aliens come down, kidnap kids, Gamera has to save the kids, and fights a giant monster that comes from the alien planet. In terms of that, I think it's an absolute blast. However, it is not a good movie. And when I say not a good movie, I mean it's not a well-made movie. It's not well-constructed, necessarily. It's one of those movies that you just kind of watch and you just take in, let the smile creep over your face, and just enjoy Gamera vs. Guiron. But really the biggest problem here is the production quality and the quality of the script, because while the dialogue isn't awful, it's very, very unnatural and very, very strange. And this is a Showa Gamera movie. I'm not looking for rich, engrossing dialogue, but I would like some dialogue that makes some sense. There's so many times in this movie, and maybe it's the translation. Again, I'm watching this on the Gamera Legacy Collection DVD collection. Well, that's 2 collections too many. And as I talked about in my Berrigan review, they definitely do some strange translation issues. So I just wanted to establish that while this isn't a good movie, it's a very, very entertaining, and I think a fun, good kids movie. And overall, definitely my favorite of the strictly made-for-kids, out there, campy Showa Gamera movies. Again, it's not my favorite Showa Gamera movie. I don't think I enjoy it more than the first movie. It'd probably be 4th in that kind of ranking. But I do think of the type of Gamera movies that came out after Virus, of big alien shows up, Gamera has to fight it. I do think it's the best. I think it's the most fun. I mentioned Doctor Who a couple minutes ago because it's a very Doctor Who-ish type story. These kids crash land on a strange alien world, they explore it, run into some aliens, think they're friendly at first, and then they turn out to be evil. It's very reminiscent of the original Dalek story from Hartnell's run on Doctor Who, and it's a very Doctor Who-ish type movie. The problem is, Doctor Who was a TV show, and had certain limitations being a low-budget science fiction TV show in the early 1960s. This is a movie that's part of a popular, high-grossing franchise, and it looks about as good as Doctor Who did at this time on BBC. This is 1969. This was the end of Patrick Troughton's era on Doctor Who, and it looks about as good as Patrick Troughton's era on Doctor Who. That's a little bit of a problem. And overall, the story, the visual effects, it feels more like a made-for-TV movie than it does a theatrical release. And I think that's a problem that all of the later Showa Gamera movies have, is that they don't really feel like theatrical films. They feel like episodes of a Gamera TV show, which, as that, I think they'd actually be pretty fun, because they'd be shorter. So, and as we've talked about, I think part of the problem that a lot of these movies have is stretching out their material for an hour and a half. And that's where a lot of the stock footage comes in. Thankfully not this time around, but that was certainly an issue last time. But again, that's not really an issue this time. So with all that said, let's get into the plot synopsis and talk about what I do like about this movie and how I think it improves over Virus. So here's basically how it goes down. Some scientists on Earth receive some radio waves from outer space that might signify that there's extraterrestrial life out there trying to contact us. However, it's not certain because the radio waves are very, very cryptic, and even if it was from extraterrestrial life, they'd be so far away that we wouldn't be able to do anything about it. The aliens would have to make the next move. Meanwhile, we're introduced to our child protagonists. We're introduced to Akio and Tom, an American boy and a Japanese boy, who are both astronomical enthusiasts and are staring out of their telescope when we're introduced to them, as well as Akio's sister, Tomoko, who is really the most annoying of the three of them, running around screaming at her brother, and oh boy. So Akio and Tom are looking out of their telescope and witness what appears to be a spaceship land in a field nearby their house. They want to go out and investigate, of course, but Akio's mother comes in and yells at them, all calling them foolish and saying that they should study or go to sleep. Pick one. What a great mother. And they, of course, go to sleep and plan on going to investigate the spaceship the following day, which they do. So Akio and Tom and Tomoko go out to the field where the spaceship landed, find it, and Akio and Tom go on board the ship wanting to investigate. Before that, however, they run into a police officer by the name of Kondo. I love Kondo. He's a hysterical, mostly sympathetic adult figure in one of these later Showa Gamera movies. Enjoy this while you can, because it won't last, my friends. And makes fun of them for going off to look for spaceships and tells them that they're just going to cause trouble, and he's very, very fun. Tom and Akio fly up in the spaceship and are rocketing out into the outer atmosphere, not knowing what's going to happen to them and very, very scared. And as they reach the upper atmosphere, they're about to run into some meteorites, which will obviously, kill them. However, just in the nick of time, Gamera comes flying in with his epic theme song playing, crashing into the meteorites and knocking them out of the way of the spaceship, saving the children. Then we get pretty much an exact repeat scene from Gamera vs. Virus, not stock footage-wise, but it plays out the same way, of Gamera having a race with the kids, this time them being in a spaceship instead of a submarine. And this time, however, the spaceship outruns Gamera, and we learn that the spaceship is being remote controlled by somebody who doesn't want Gamera tagging along. Gamera flies after the kids, worried about their safety, however they outrun him, and end up on a strange alien world called Terra, and a desolate, frozen tundra wasteland, where all the buildings are seemingly desolate with nobody around, except for a couple of interesting local occupants, but two big ones, literally, being two giant monsters. One of them being Gauss? The fuck is Gauss doing on Terra? Anyway, so we've got some kind of space Gauss here, and then we've got another monster that comes out of the ground called Guiron. Not like he comes out of the ground like Baragon, but he comes out of the ground as in a giant hole opens up and he comes out of it. Clearly, intentionally. And absolutely decimates Gauss in probably the most brutal monster fight I have ever seen in a 60s kids movie, slicing Gauss up into tiny pieces. For kids! So Guiron kills Gauss and then returns to his hole, and the kids go on to explore Terra and run into two attractive alien beauties whose names I didn't write down. They mean something kind of significant, too, so I probably should have written them down. And they are very, very nice to Akio and Tom, explaining that on the planet Terra, they had experienced some sort of apocalypse, and that their planet was slowly freezing. And that they sent out radio waves looking for help, because they needed help to try and save their planet and try and escape from it. Well, at least that's what they tell the boys. However, when they have the boys distracted, they explain that to each other. They want to, get this kids, they want to use the spaceship and go to Earth and colonize that planet. But before they do that, they want to eat Akio and Tom's brains raw. What? Well, they explain that, and this is real science, kids, I'm not kidding. If you read Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, this is real fucking science. Apparently germs, both on their planet and on ours, are able to inherit the memories and customs of another thing that they consume by consuming the brain matter. But I mean, it obviously wouldn't work with human brains, because we just don't work that way. And, they want to consume the children's brains and use their memories of living on Earth in order to adapt to living on Earth, thus saving themselves and being able to one day hopefully take it over. However, they learn from Akio that somebody's coming to help them, and that somebody is, of course, Gamera. Gamera comes flying down, and realizing that he's going to be a problem, they send out Guiron to stop him. Gamera and Guiron have a fight. Guiron and Gamera's fight ends in a draw because both monsters injure the other pretty badly. Gamera slams Guiron into the ground a bunch of times. Guiron cuts up Gamera really badly, and they both go off to their respective places of healing in order to heal up and come back and fight later. They fight another time after this, which also ends in a draw. However, it actually ends with Akio and Tom locking up Guiron after they realize what's going on with the alien women, and after the alien women have shaved Akio's head, attempting to eat his brain, and they are now trying to escape. They do a bunch of crazy shit to try and to keep the alien women at bay as they try and escape. Gamera, of course, is healing at the bottom of the lake, so he's no help, and they're left to their own devices. Guiron, however, breaks out of his hole and then goes on a rampage through Terra, not being controlled by the alien women anymore, and actually attacks the alien women who are trying to escape on their little spaceship, and slices the spaceship clean in half and kills one of them. The other one wanders around Terra for a while, until eventually the final battle between Gamera and Guiron causes her to get killed off as well. And Akio and Tom are left to try and survive for themselves. Trying to help out Gamera by firing a missile right at Guiron. Gamera catches it, throws it into the hole that Guiron was firing shurikens out of earlier to try and prevent Gamera from going into his shell, and blows up Guiron, and thus the day is saved. Gamera repairs the spaceship by putting it back together and using his fire to weld it together, because why not? And Akio, Tom, and Gamera return to Earth. Gamera, once again, having saved the day, saved the children. Akio and Tom are returned to their families, and everybody's learned a big lesson about, get this, kids, since we saw this alien planet where everything was supposedly peaceful with no wars and no traffic accidents, we still learned that they were still horrible creatures, and that Earth is still pretty good, and that we have to work to produce a better world, and that it's not out there for us to go and pick at. So according to Akio, the two most dire issues on the planet are war, fair enough, and traffic accidents. Key on accidents. How can you stop traffic accidents unless you get rid of cars? It doesn't make any sense. So how about this story, kids? Well, it's a fun children's space adventure, and what more could you possibly want from it? In terms of being a Gamera movie specifically aimed at kids, it's actually pretty fun in that way. And because the plot is simpler here and far less hackneyed than Gamera vs. Virus's was, it's not as easy to pick apart and rant about how little of it actually makes any sense, though there are a couple of things that I will mention. Let's start with number one, the spaceship itself. How the hell does it get to Earth, and what the hell is it doing there? We get one line from one of the girls about this, and they just explain that they found it and then sent it there via remote control. We have no idea what the purpose was. Was it to capture two human children and kidnap them, take them to Terra, and then eat their brains? I mean, I guess that makes sense given what they do in the movie, but when they come up with the idea to eat their brains, it seems pretty on the spot. It's not like they had planned that previously, which is really, really bizarre. I don't know why I don't know what they thought they could possibly achieve by sending the spaceship to Earth. Why didn't they just go to Earth themselves? Is it because they wouldn't be able to survive there? Clearly that's not true. Terra is Earth's sister planet. The atmosphere, the air, everything is the same. That's why Akio and Tom are able to survive on the planet, because it's Earth's sister planet. The atmosphere, everything is the same. So I don't understand why they didn't just, if they had the spaceship, just fly there already, kidnap a couple humans on Earth, eat their brains, then bam, you're good to go. I don't know what they sought to accomplish. It almost just seems like a complete freak accident, which clearly it's not, though, because why would the spaceship then go faster when Gamera was trying to catch up with it? Clearly they wanted the kids, and they wanted them alone. They could have easily come up with a good enough reason as to why. I don't understand the ambiguity or the complete lack of an explanation. It could have been very easily explained as they wouldn't be able to survive there, or they wanted to go in with knowledge because they wanted to conquer the Earth. That's not even necessarily what they want to do. They never really... Conquering it seems to be secondary to just surviving, because they're all about survival. Which is actually something I like. I actually find the Terrans, which I guess is what I'll call them, since we don't get another name for them in the movie, actually kind of interesting. I mean, they're not especially like, they're not a Doctor Who villain, but they're actually pretty cool. They have this whole survival of the fittest, almost robotic automaton type of society where you just follow a certain code, and you follow that code until you die one day, and if you can't help the cause, then you have to be killed off because you're useless, which we see in the movie when one of the two girls gets buried under some rubble, and then the other one shoots her, calling her useless. I actually really like this society, and it's kind of interesting, and also very apparent as to why it didn't work. But we can also see that while they have all this advanced technology, they were able to seemingly control and create a giant monster out of Guiron, since I don't see how that would evolve naturally, especially in an ecosystem that seems to be similar enough to Earth, where the atmosphere is the same, and also we've got a creature from Earth that evolved here the exact same way, with Gauss, except that he's a different color. So while they have all this advanced technology, clearly they've sacrificed morality and they've sacrificed their humanity in order to get there. And the question the film, I guess, is dancing around at the end is whether or not that's worth it. And clearly the answer is no. It's not a well-explored idea, but it's an interesting enough idea, especially for a kid's movie. But in terms of getting to things that don't make sense, I'd like to briefly mention Gauss because they don't really explain it. The thing I just said of him evolving there because it's Earth's sister planet is what I gleaned from it, but they don't really say that. They just say, oh, there's a Gauss here just like on Earth. What I glean from that is because it's Earth's sister planet, that the evolutionary paths of whatever animal Gauss evolved from was similar enough that it created this identical monster. So I guess that's the reason why. The problem is that Gauss is a prehistoric monster on Earth, and he was just awakened, so I'm not really sure why this... And that was also the explanation for why there was only one of them. They were a whole species. So I don't know why there's just one flying around on Terra. Dylan, in fact, Super DM64, my fellow demon from outer space and son of Sarazawa, posed the idea once that the Gauss actually come from space, and that maybe they just polluted themselves across the cosmos, and that this is just one that evolved on Terra, and that the other ones evolved on Earth. And that the reason why they're prehistoric is because they got there so long ago that they're just considered part of the fossil record. I like that idea, and that would explain it, but they don't really get into it. Again, I think more of the idea is just because it's a sister planet, it's almost like a mirror world, but this isn't an alternate reality. It's just a planet that happens to be parallel to the Earth, being exactly equidistant to each other from the Sun, but never actually facing each other or seeing each other, which doesn't make any fucking sense. Not that I know a lot about astronomy, kids, but this is another thing that doesn't make any sense. If there was another planet in our solar system that was producing space-age type technology, and we ourselves are looking into our solar system with telescopes, and we've been doing that for centuries at this point, wouldn't we fucking notice that there was another planet on the other side of our sun? Does the planet not revolve around the sun? Isn't that why we can see other planets? Because we don't all revolve around at the same exact rate. That's why different planets have different year spans. So unless we're completely parallel, where we're always revolving around a different side of the sun, I still don't see how we wouldn't know they were there. It really doesn't make any sense. And it's really kind of jarring because there's no reason why they couldn't have just put it out of our solar system. What's the reason why? Were they afraid that then it wouldn't make any sense for Gamera to be able to fly there? I mean, he shouldn't be able to fly in space anyway because, you know, he's a fucking turtle, but we're willing to accept that, so why can't we just accept that he flew out of the solar system? Why not? He's already flying faster than a rocket ship, which Akio and Tom explain when they're racing Gamera in the spaceship. So I don't understand why they couldn't just have him fly there. It's a weird, weird plot point. Though, I do kind of like the idea of Terra being a sister planet to Earth because, again, it shows that we were similar to them, but they took a different path in terms of their civilization that led to their destruction. So that's kind of a cool idea. But again, they don't really run with that idea, so they probably should have put the sensibility of the plot above that. But overall, despite the things I'm complaining about in terms of things that don't really make any sense, they're not nearly as jarring or as bothersome as they were in Gamera vs. Virus. These are all minor things, and they're things that are easily overlooked because unlike Gamera vs. Virus, there's something here to like. It's an entertaining movie. that throws a lot of creative ideas at the screen and allows you to just forget about these nonsensical things because you're being entertained, which Gamera vs. Virus didn't have. However, not all is perfect with this story in terms of it being entertaining, though. Aside from the things that don't make any sense, there are a couple of problems in terms of pacing and in terms of getting to the part that is entertaining, because not all of it's entertaining. I think that a lot of it could have been cut down. And again, this feels more like an episode of a TV show anyway, so this kind of goes without saying, but there's a lot of filler here that could have been cut out for the sake of pacing, and again, for the sake of getting to the entertaining stuff. All of the stuff with the scientists at the beginning is really, really dull, and really poorly delivered on the part of the actors. It's super slow, super like paper thin. It's like he's explaining this elementary school level science about the solar system, which I guess is fine because it's a kids movie and they want you to understand the astronomy of it all for these little kids that they want to watch the movie. But it's not like the information that he's saying is really relevant to the movie. I mean, he's just telling us about our solar system that never really comes into play in the story when Akio and Tom, Jim is the kid in the other movie. When Akio and Tom land on Terra. So, I don't really understand why they felt the need to leave it in, because it's super long and super awkward. They should have just cut it down and just left in the thing about the radio waves and just cut right to the kids. But in terms of the kids and the kids' story, again, it's way better than Gamera vs. Virus and a bunch of other films later in the franchise, because it's a classic fantasy adventure type of story of them being taken to an alien world and having to explore it. Again, it's a very Doctor Who type of story. The problem is, however, that we spend a little bit too much time building up to them leaving the planet. But it's not as bad as it could be. It could have been drawn out for a half hour. It's really only drawn out for about 10 minutes. But even still, it's still not very entertaining. And the entertaining stuff doesn't get to really until we meet up with Gamera in space. So overall, in terms of the story, what's kind of interesting about it is a couple things. It's very, very out there and campy and insane, but it's straightforward and it's done in a creative way, and it's interesting. It's not the boring, hackneyed alien invasion stuff, because it's not really an alien invasion, it's an alien exploration. So it's more interesting in that way and less hackneyed. In fact, it's not really inspired by a lot of alien invasion stories, though what I'm about to reference it to is an alien invasion story. It comes off more as being inspired by Invasion of the Astro Monster from 1965. Because of, Godzilla went to an alien world in that, and it was all about astronauts exploring an alien world and interacting with an alien society that they thought were peaceful and turned out to be evil. And also, in a similar sense, the civilizations of the Exilians in that film and the Terrans in this film are actually kind of similar, because they're both these kind of robotic, survival of the fittest type of species that don't really have empathy or emotion. They just kind of function. But what's also interesting is that as we go down the franchise, we're still technically watching monster movies, but we're more watching movies that happen to have monsters in them, and we're not really watching a monster movie. It's not about the horror of the monster. It's not about telling a story about the monster. The monsters are all big plot devices to go in there and fight in the grander scheme of an alien invasion story. And that's pretty much how Gamera, Guiron, and I guess Gauss function in this film. But in terms of Gamera's place in the story overall, it's not bad. It's about as good as can be expected with this version of Gamera. I mean, he just kind of shows up to save the kids, and that's basically it. It's not terrible, and he has enough screen time. It's not like Gamera vs. Barragan, where he feels completely superfluous. He needs to be there. He solves the main problem. He's got plenty of screen time. His place in the story is fine. But with that being said, let's get into the characters. There's actually not a lot of them to talk about. Again, it feels more like an episode of a TV show. Again, it feels like an episode of Doctor Who. And if you watch, Doctor Who in this era, when they would go to an alien planet, like I'm thinking of Carnival of Monsters, there aren't a ton of characters. It's all a very contained, smaller story with a small group of characters. we jump back and forth between the different perspectives, like we did in Carnival of Monsters. Kind of similar here. We're jumping back between the aliens' perspective, between Akio and Tom's perspective, between Gamera's perspective, and then between Kondo and all of the characters on Earth's perspective. And we're seeing all of their different stories as they build up and coalesce into each other. Overall, they're not bad. There's not really much to say about them because they're not that bad. It's not like I come on here and rave about how terrible they are or about how great they are. They just they fill their purpose. What I was especially surprised about on this viewing is that I actually found Akio and Tom to be less annoying than I initially remembered. You know, I had the theory that as you go down the show, a Gamera series, the kids get more and more annoying. And that's certainly partially true, but they're not nearly as annoying as Masao and Jim were in the previous film. They're far less annoying. I think part of that is that they're younger than those characters were. So, regardless of what they do or what they say, they're immediately going to be perceived as more innocent. And because they're perceived as more innocent, we sympathize with them more and like them more. So that certainly works in its favor. And overall, they're not these unlikable asshole pranksters like Masao and Jim were in Gamera vs. Virus. Akio and Tom, they're just kids. They're just going out doing kid things. They have their interests and they pursue their interests. In fact, if you watch the American version of this movie, they make them out to be way worse than the Japanese version. The only problem they have is in their acting. There's some really awful line delivery from them in this movie, and some really unnatural, jagged dialogue that doesn't work in any kind of context of just expository, messy dialogue where it's like, why would you say that at that point? That doesn't make any sense. That's all over this movie. But again, they're young kids, I guess it's to be expected, and it doesn't completely take you out of the fun. In terms of the adults, however, and I would talk about Tomoko, Akio's sister, but there's not really much to say. I kind of said everything I had to say about her earlier. She's young, she's an idiot, she's annoying, but she doesn't have a ton of screen time, so she's tolerable. The adults get the really shitty end of the stick in this movie, though. The only one I like, again, is Kondo. I fucking love Kondo. The actor playing him is just having such a good time playing the role. He's just so full of life and energy and warmth, and you just love him. He brings a necessary comic edge to the movie, because again, just like Gamera vs. Virus, because it's a kids movie, there's a lot of comedic elements in it, though far less than Gamera vs. Virus. And what little is here is actually quite funny, especially with Kondo stuff. I was smiling the whole time. Again, not necessarily that it's legitimately comedically worthwhile, but it's fun, it's light, it's warm. It's kind of sitcom type of stuff, so it's fun in that way. The rest of the adult cast, in terms of the Earthlings, we'll talk about the aliens in a second. Akio and Jim and Tom's parents, I cannot separate them because they have similar names. I'm sorry. So Akio and Tom's parents, I hate them. I absolutely despise their mothers. We never meet their fathers in this movie. And I presume that, given Akio's hatred of traffic accidents, I presume that his dad died in a traffic accident and that's why he's so against them and wants to find a world without them. By the way, if they had introduced that idea, wouldn't that be so fucking cool? Anyway, so they're stuck up, they're dull, they're unimaginative, and they show zero affection for their children. When their kids are missing, they're just like, they'll turn up at some point. Oh, I'm sorry that this makes me look bad that I lost your kid, but we'll find them. Let's let the police officers show way more concern for them and be proactive and try and find them. Well, we just sit home and yell at and scold them without them being here for being foolish and for being liars. The fuck, man? I don't like Akio's mother, I don't like Tom's mother, I hate them both. And at the end, they don't redeem themselves anyway. They show, when they finally find them alive, they still show zero affection for them. Kondo is way happier than they are to see them. It's just very distressing. I absolutely hate their mothers. So let's talk about the aliens a little bit. They're very, very fun. Again, they're very, very attractive. I'm sure Joshua Hernandez, if he's listening, he enjoyed these aliens. But But anyway, so I actually really like them. I love how warm they are to Akio and Tom at first. I love how they make them donuts and they make them milk, and they're very warm and inviting, and they're talking to them about all this different astronomical stuff, and it's it's cool, and it sets them up well. You actually like them, and that's something that few alien invasion movies that do, or not, again, this isn't really an alien invasion movie, but alien exploration movies do, where double-crossing aliens usually aren't even likable when you initially see them. But I actually really like the Terrans in this situation. So, and they play off each other well, so they're fun to watch, which is something that the Virasians, or the Virus, whatever the fuck they were, definitely didn't achieve in Gamera vs. Virus. I'm just shitting on Gamera vs. Virus in this video. And I think that's all I'm going to say about them, because I kind of already talked about them in terms of their culture and what they're trying to do. Again, they're very creepy and very intimidating in terms of what they're trying to do. They're trying to eat kid brains. I know when I saw this movie and I was a kid, I was terrified of them. But talking about them, I'd actually like to talk thematically about this movie for a second, if I may. I know many of you are probably listening going, he's really not going to analyze this movie for a theme, is he? And I absolutely am. Alright, so it's not well explored or anything, but there is definitely something thematic going on here. And most good kids movies do have something thematic going on, because they're kids movies. A lot of them like to have a moral thrown in at the end that kind of sums up the point of the movie for the kids in the audience. This has that, but actually the point that's summed up at the end isn't the interesting thing that the movie is thematically doing. Actually, what it's really doing is it's talking about imagination and about creativity and about how parents tend to subdue and beat that out of their kids at a young age. We as parents, or not we, I'm not a parent, but parents tend to, certain parents, not all parents to be sure, tend to focus so hard on academic success and on numbers and GPA and getting into good schools that they never actually focus on imagination and creative development first, because that's really important. Because yes, they'll get into a good school, but what happens after that? They're going to come out of school as not brainless, but as robotic automatons, which is what we see here with the Terrans, which is why I really like this theme, because that's what Akio and Tom's mothers are doing. Constantly yelling at their children to go study so that way they get into a good school. Meanwhile, Tomoko is trying to save her brother and her friend from aliens, and her mother is just saying go get into a good school. It's very much so. It's get some perspective, lady, Jesus. And the whole point of it is that the Terrans are a warning against a lack of imagination and creativity in a society. Yes, we'll have scientific advancement, but we'll have such a lack of empathy and morals that our civilization will crumble because it can't sustain itself. Our technological wonder will outdo our imagination, and it'll destroy us. That's the point of the Terrans. I actually really like that idea, and I think it's a really good idea to explore in a kids movie. So I actually really like that. Again, they don't really explore it enough. I kind of wish that was the thing that they summed up in the end, and that Akio and Tom's mothers went through a character arc. Because at the end, they just admit, oh, we should have listened to our children because they were actually abducted by aliens. Oh my god. But they don't show any kind of regret at having forced academics down their children's throats and subduing their creativity. That's where the arc should have come in, not in believing them. No, the story is completely asinine. Well, oh, this is the other thing that doesn't make sense, by the way. Last thing. The whole point of nobody believing Tomoko about Tom and Akio being abducted by aliens is because being abducted by aliens is a ridiculous concept. Or it would be in the real world. This world was invaded by aliens a year ago. What do you mean you don't believe them? The world was invaded by aliens, and they talk about that in this movie when Akio tells the Terrans about Gamera. What the fuck, man? I actually really enjoy that idea, but again, it gets overpowered in the end by this other idea that I don't really like. Well, I guess I like the idea, but it's very, this is where the hackneyed stuff comes in, and where it's like, I didn't see that in the movie that I just watched. It's just the filmmakers trying to make it seem like the film was about something that it really wasn't, so that way they can say that it was about something. Even though it is about something, but that's not what they sum up. They just go, oh, Wouldn't world peace be great, everybody? And that we should work towards a better Earth here and not look to the stars for a world that already has world peace. I like that concept. I like the concept of having to work for it. But it's not really what the movie is about. It's all about this imagination thing. And I think the imagination thing is a way more interesting and unique idea than this other crap about the fucking world peace shit. But kids, you have to agree with that message because Gamera nodded to it. And if Gamera nods to something, you have to agree with it. With that being said, let's talk about the monsters. So let's just talk about Gamera and Guiron. Let's start with Guiron, because I like to start with the new monsters. I fucking love Guiron. I'm a big Guiron fan. I really, really love Guiron because he's a completely ridiculous, absurd idea, but he's so much fun to watch. And in a movie that's already completely balls to the walls crazy, why not watch a monster that's also balls to the walls crazy? What's stopping you? There's nothing stopping you, so let's just enjoy it, shall we? So I really, really like that they were just like, we're making a campy kids movie, let's just throw in a monster that can only fit in a campy kids movie. Which is weird, because while he fits in that way, what he does not fit in a kids movie. Guiron is fucking brutal, man. He chops up Gauss and then tries to eat him, but doesn't because he smells weird. Not kidding, that's a line in the movie. And he chops open Gamera's shell, and he tries to cut off his arm, and oh my god, he just fucks everything up. And he shoots shurikens into Gamera. He's fucking brutal. And there's so much blood in this movie. So much blood. Sure, it's differently colored than actual blood. It's purple and green and doesn't look like real blood. And when people die in this movie, they just kind of evaporate. I really, really like Guiron. And what I also like about him is that they immediately establish him as a threat for Gamera by him being able to take out in essentially one hit Gamera's arch nemesis. He kills Gauss very, very easily, and Gauss doesn't do anything to stop him. And since he's able to take out Gamera's arch nemesis that quickly, it makes perfect sense that Gamera has to have 3 fights with him before he can finally kill him. And even then, he needs help from Akio and Tom. So I really, really like Guiron. Except for one thing. So here's my only problem with Guiron from a design concept, because what am I going to talk about characterization-wise? He's a guard dog. My only problem with him design-wise is his face is really, really derpy. He looks kind of like a kaiju version of Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. Look at it! Look at it! That's fucking Eeyore! And overall, I've never been a fan of giant monsters who walk on 4 legs, who bend their legs at the knees. That's what Gamera does when he walks on all 4s. That's also what Showa and Geras does. And that's what they do with Guiron. It just doesn't look very good. And doesn't make any sense, because if the creature evolved to walk on all 4s, it wouldn't do that. It would have legs like a lizard that outstretched. I think Berrigan actually did that as well, but you can't really have an actor do that is the thing. You have to have them crouch down like that, otherwise they can't really perform in the suit. So I'm not going to criticize that part of it, because there's nothing they could have done to stop it. But it's really the face that's the only problem. He just looks super, super derpy, and they really should have gone with a more menacing face. He just looks like, help me! He just looks in pain, and I feel bad. It's like, oh, somebody kill it. Put it out of its misery. Again, kaiju version of Eeyore. Before we move on to Gamera, I should also probably mention that, since I'm talking about these movies in terms of historical relevance, that Guiron, at least in theory, I've never heard anybody who worked on this movie actually come out and say this, that Guiron was the inspiration for Knifehead from Pacific Rim, the first kaiju that Gypsy Danger fights in the movie. Again, that's what everybody says, and I think that must be what's going on, because Knifehead, Guiron, it's like the same thing. So I would be, and Guillermo del Toro knows a lot about kaiju movies, so I would imagine completely that he took the idea from Guiron and he was doing Knifehead as an inspiration. I've never heard anybody say that he looked specifically at Guiron, though, but I imagine that's what's going on. So, without Guiron, you wouldn't have Knifehead, so for all you Guiron haters out there, suck on that shit, motherfuckers. But anyway, let's talk about Gamera, of course, as we always like to. I don't have much to say. I kind of covered it in the last 2 videos. He's how he's been for the past 2 movies. He's the friend to all children. He's a big, lovable hero. He's fun to watch, but he's ultra campy. And he's super heroic and almost to a fault. And that's his whole characterization. There's not much else to him. The interesting thing about this one, though, is that Gamera gets to do a lot more personable stuff in terms of body motions and moves and stuff. Like, he does gymnastic moves. He does these gestures of just like, hey, fuck you, Guiron. He doesn't stick up the finger like the movie Ape, but he does do these gestures of like, hey, I kicked that motherfucker's ass. Stuff like that is nice, and this is also the first movie where we really get to see, though I guess we saw this in the last one too, of Gamera showing his intelligence as a fighter, using strategy and analyzing his enemies' weaknesses and exploiting them to his advantage. So that's really cool, and Gamera is very intelligent in this movie, and I really like that. Aside from him repairing a spaceship, that's just weird. But with that being said, let's talk about the monster fights and the special effects, of course. What I like about it is very little stock footage. There's that one scene where Akio is explaining to the girls about who Gamera is. That's where the stock footage is. It only lasts for about 5 minutes, so I really can't complain about it, if even that long. So I can't really complain about it that much. But overall, the special effects, they're not that good. They're very cheap. They're quickly done, but all in all, they're not awful. They look like they were made on a TV budget, and for TV effects, they wouldn't look bad. They'd hold up pretty well against something like Ultraman. But as a theatrical release, they fall very short. They could have taken a little bit of time to hammer out some of the specifics of the special effects. It's very cheap and quickly done. And I think that they should have taken some more time to make things look better. Whenever the monsters aren't suits, they look awful, just like in the last movie. Like whenever Guiron is jumping in the air and ramming into something in midair, which is kind of his signature move, it's clearly just some kind of puppet that they're like throwing at something, and it looks awful. When Gamera jumps into the water, he looks like just a toy being thrown into the water by a kid. There's no weight to it. They're just not very good, but they're not awful. They get the job done, I guess. The suitimation is fine. It's just everything else that sucks. The miniatures themselves, I actually do like. They don't look very convincing all the time, but they're elaborately made, and they're very characterized in a very fantastic setting. So they look good. They just don't look realistic. But it's a fantasy, so I think that it's fine that they don't look realistic. So that's not a huge problem. There's some good matte paintings. I love the architecture of Terra. It looks very alien. I love the blues and the dark reds and the whites and the yellows. That all looks great. And it's a very well designed alien world with teleporters and big circular rooms. The worst thing that the movie does is that the blue screen looks terrible. Every bit of blue screen that they do looks like shit. And whenever they're standing in front of monster battles, or whenever they're standing in front of a wider matte painting, and it's the kids, they're on a blue screen, it looks terrible. You can see the folds in the screen, everything looks faded behind them. It looks awful. In terms of the battles themselves, there's really not much to say. They're fun. They're campy. There's plenty of dynamic moves in here. The fights are very unique. And Gamera and Guiron go together in terms of a fighting situation. I love all the cutting. I love all the punching, and I love the intelligent moves that Gamera pulls off, using Guiron's weaknesses against him. Guiron will try and like jump on top of Gamera, but Gamera will jump out of the way at the last second, and Guiron will hit his face on the ground. I love the way Gamera takes out Guiron. Overall, the monster fights are actually pretty good. Campy as all hell, but pretty good in terms of being campy. So with all that said, let's wrap up this review because it's getting a little longer than I intended. So what are my closing thoughts on Gamera vs. Guiron? Again, I think it's a lively, fun, entertaining kids movie. And I think in that way, with that perspective, I think it's absolutely worth watching. It's a riot. I do think it's one of those monster movies that you would have had to seen as a kid in order to appreciate it, unless you really appreciate camp. But if you haven't seen it as a kid, you're probably not going to get anything out of it. Because, again, it's really not a good movie. It's just more of a fun movie. So, if you're looking for a good fantasy movie or a good monster movie, this isn't really for you. Again, this is for kids, and if you look at it in that way, if you've got some younger kids around the house who are into giant monsters, and when I mean young, I mean like 4 or 5. I'm talking very young. I think this is probably the best option from the Gamera series for them. It's an absolute riot. And I think it's fun to watch with them. It's a good time, as long as you don't mind them seeing a lot of purple and green blood. And the idea of brain eating, but, you know, don't be stuck up. Don't be Akio's mother. Overall, I don't think it's a good movie. I think it's a fun movie. I think it's imaginative. I think it's entertaining. It's not especially well made, but again, it's creative, and that really went a long way for me with this one. Score. I struggle between 2, kind of like I did with the first movie. I struggle between a 2 and a 2.5, but I think that because I don't think it's a good movie, but I think it's fun, I think I'm gonna give it... it's tough. I think I'm actually going to go with a 2.5 out of 5 for this one. And I know a lot of you are going to think I'm absolutely crazy, that that's way too high. It's a full 1.5 above Virus, even though they do a lot of the same things and hit a lot of the same beats. But again, as I explained earlier, I think it's way more imaginative than Virus is, and just better as a kids movie. So that's why I'm giving it that much higher of a score, and the average rating of 2.5 out of 5. Again, not good, but fun. I think that, in that way, that is the perfect score. So that is going to do it, kids, for my review of Gamera vs. Guiron from 1969. Hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all will continue to join me on Gamera Palooza as we delve into the realm of the unknown, kids, because now, from now on, I haven't seen any of the Showa Gamera movies that we're going to review. These are all going to be first impressions, my first viewing, and my thoughts. So we'll see what happens starting tomorrow when we review 1970s Gamera vs. Jiger. I hope you guys will join me for that review. Until then, sayonara, kids.